Welcome to the Sweaty Pillow. Today's guest is so extraordinary. We're so lucky to have Dr. Suzanne Steinbaum with us today. Suzanne her career is just outstanding. Suzanne's a cardiologist with a private practice in New York City, published author, Every Woman's Guide to a Heart Healthy Life, and we'll have all these links. In the YouTube video. Former Director of Women's Cardiovascular Prevention, Health and Wellness at Mount Sinai, founder and CEO of Heart Tech Health and MyAdesso. Wow, and there's more and more and more. You're such a extraordinary woman, Dr. Steinbaum. Thanks for joining us today.
I'm very happy to be here with you.
We called this podcast the 911 of women's cardio health. I have been serving the menopausal woman with our business for 12 years. I felt like I was pretty on top of menopause and the key issues, but I have missed what a crisis this is, the cardio conversation. Can you catch us up with the risks and what women are dealing with when they're in menopause and their heart health?
It's so interesting, and bravo to you for having this conversation for 12 years because, as you know, this conversation has not been had. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're now talking about menopause. But here is the most interesting thing: 70% of women in menopause will have some form of heart disease. And over the age of 65, we talk about at least 50% having high blood pressure, the epidemic of all of these risk factors that actually lead to heart disease. So, high blood pressure and high cholesterol are two of the greatest risk factors of heart disease and two of the things that happen after menopause. And we can really talk about the physiology around it and how it all happens. But all I'm going to tell you is when we lose estrogen, it is a disaster. It's all the stuff happens and we know that. But what I really want women to understand is entering menopause, if we do it without anything, we gain weight, our cholesterol goes up, our blood pressure goes up, we get hot flashes, we feel terrible. 10 years of this transitioning and decrease in estrogen, at the end of it, that's when our heart disease risk skyrockets.
Hmm.
What happens during this time, I want women to understand, is up to us. I always say trade for menopause like you're training for a marathon, and you will get through it and be fine. And that means exercising regularly and eating healthy. I know it's so boring to talk about the stupid stuff like diet and exercise. Everyone wants a quick fix. But those things are the cornerstones of what brings you into this phase in your life in a way that you are going to feel the most vital, the most healthy, the most fit, and quite frankly, fabulous that you can, because this is a really interesting time in life. And as we were talking, we spend 40% of our lives in menopause or
Mm-hmm.
going through that transition.
Yeah.
I believe this is an interesting moment in time. We don't just lose estrogen. We also get a decrease in those feel good hormones that make us caretakers, that
Mm.
oxytocin that makes us put our children first. That actually decreases also. So the good thing about menopause is we don't care as much anymore. and we start taking care of ourselves. And you know what?
Oh,
Feel is guilty. And I say that with jest, but I say that in a way that I believe we all understand what it feels like to put everyone first.
mm-hmm.
Here's your moment. Put
Mm-hmm.
yourself first a little bit. Don't feel so badly about it. And quite frankly, heart care is self care. And
Mm-hmm.
if we're going to really understand what self care is, it's not just about a manicure and pedicure. It's really about taking care of ourselves in a way that we prevent heart disease.
You talk about this amazing phenomenon of the drop of oxytocin and we actually care less about everyone else around us and we can invest time in ourselves. But it's more than just a nice feel good feeling. We have to save our lives. If 70% of women will have heart disease in menopause and it's killing more women than all cancers combined, this is a 911.
This is the moment where we focus on how we prevent heart disease. My whole concept of heart care is self care, is how we prevent us from getting sick. And this is
Mm.
a reality check for all women. So, as we go through menopause, we focus on the risk factors. And these risk factors, and I'm going to tell you what the American Heart Association calls the essential eight. It's blood pressure, cholesterol, elevated sugars, and diabetes fits in there. It's obesity, sedentary lifestyle, poor diet, smoking. And guess what the last one is? Not great sleep. And I think that having that piece added makes us realize that we have to focus on our whole lives to really address these issues. Now, the one thing I'm going to tell you about these essential eight, they're what we call modifiable. We can actually focus on these from a place of prevention. We can focus on diet and exercise to get down our cholesterol, to get down our blood pressure. And when in fact it doesn't work, we have medication. And I'm going to tell you, medication, a lot of people don't want to be on it, they don't like it, but it can save your life. It could
Mhm.
prevent you from getting sick. That doesn't mean you go out and have a cheeseburger and bacon and your cholesterol's high and who cares? It means take care of yourself. But when in fact you have a really hard time getting these numbers down, it's not your fault. Don't feel guilty. Menopause is a reality on understanding our physiology changes, and sometimes we need medication. And I think it's important, first and foremost, to go to your provider, get your numbers checked, know what your numbers are, and also know who you are. What's your family history? Is this something more important to you than someone that might not have a family history? Because that makes a difference. But I also want to bring up other issues, adverse outcomes of pregnancy. Did you have preeclampsia, gestational diabetes,
Mm.
high blood pressure, elevated sugars? All of these things increase your risk of heart disease 10 years later, certainly when you get into menopause. So, you as a woman, where you are today, you have to look at your entire life because your whole life impacts your risk of heart disease, especially when you enter menopause.
It's such a fascinating conversation, and it's very directional for women to take ownership of their health. As we're having these conversations through our massive community of menopausal women, this has never come up how you're describing it. We talk about the brain fog, we talk about mood, not sleeping, overheating, weight gain. But I will tell you in 10 years of conversations, it's not coming up the way you're describing it. So, what is your advice, practically speaking? You said, talk to your provider. What are the tests that you should insist on getting to get an understanding of your current state of your heart health?
That's such a great question. And I wish it wasn't complicated,
Mm.
but it is. It's so easy for us to understand how we can prevent or we can catch breast cancer. We all got the mammogram message. We all
Yeah,
know
yeah.
ribbon, like we're there, right?
Hmm, hmm.
But when it comes to heart disease, we can't see it, we can't feel it, we can't touch it, we can't just take a picture and know the answer. So we have to look at the big picture around it. And one of the things that we focus on first and foremost are symptoms. And women's symptoms of heart disease are often very different than a man's. A man will get crushing chest pain, described often in
Hmm.
textbooks as an elephant sitting on your chest. Women do get chest pain, but things like shortness of breath, jaw pain, back pain, nausea, vomiting, even flu like symptoms and sleep disorders can be associated with heart disease. Now, everyone listening is sitting here thinking, oh my God, I have heart disease, because that literally describes all of us, at least several days out of the month, right?
Yeah.
What I'd like to say is that when you know your risk factors, so let's go back to that cholesterol, that's a blood test. Blood
Hmm.
pressure, you need to get your blood pressure checked. Sugars, that's a blood test. So you go to your provider and you say, I need to know if I'm at risk for heart disease. I'm menopausal. I need to understand this. There are other tests out there. There's something called a coronary artery calcium score that
Mm.
looks for calcification in the artery, which is associated with plaque in the artery and associated with heart disease. That's a screening test. As the CEO of MyAdesso, we do something called a cardiopulmonary exercise test that actually can find out if the arteries are stiff. It's the beginning stages of plaque formation before we actually see calcium develop. The lining of the artery called the endothelium gets stiff, and the small arteries become diseased before the large arteries do. And that's very, very common in menopausal women. It's called microvascular disease. And so getting these tests, I'm packaging under the title of the MyAdesso test, and you can certainly find out about it through our website and information. But to understand, is my lining, my endothelium stiff? Are my microvascular arteries stiff? And am I at risk for developing? I focus on prevention more than anything.
Mm.
And in looking at prevention, how are you feeling is the number one question. And if the answer is, I have shortness of breath when I'm exercising more than I ever did, the likelihood is those arteries are getting stiff and that those risk factors need to be checked. If that blood pressure is high, embrace some medication if you need it.
Mm.
Figure out how to go on a low salt, low fat diet. Cut back on the sugars. I know we talk about weight gain. I'm going to tell you, you got to look at it from a different place. Yes, there is a little bit of weight gain, but are you exercising? Are you watching your diet? Are you paying attention to this in a healthy way? To get to the point where you're not allowing this weight to take over, you're not
Yeah.
allowing this process to take charge of you, that you're still in the driver's seat on this. Now, I'm not going to tell you that you're going to have the body you had when you're 20. Give that up. It's not necessary. It doesn't matter. And in fact, having a little extra weight on us, believe it or not, is protective for the brain. But we don't want to become overweight. We don't want to become obese. We don't want to be in that category that we're overweight and now our overweight is impacting our cholesterol and our blood pressure. And we can do it. 80% of the time, heart disease is preventable. We can actually manage menopause. And I'm sitting here saying to you, I know it's not easy.
So you said 80% of this is preventable and gave us a really good rationale on absolutely getting control of our healthy lifestyle, what we put in our mouth, our exercise. If we're doing all the actual things we're supposed to be doing in terms of the diet that's required and moving our bodies, how much will that play a role in this 80% prevention that you talk about?
When I talk about diet and exercise, I don't think of it as I have to go on a diet. I think of it as how are you going to nourish your body
Mm.
so you keep your cholesterol down and you keep your blood pressure down. I don't think about exercise. I think about movement. What are you going to do for yourself every single day instead of sitting at a desk, sitting in front of your computer, sitting in a car? How are you going to move to prevent you from being overweight, from your cholesterol going up, from your blood pressure going up? So if we address these risk factors from this place of how much do I have in control, I'm going to tell you that it varies per person, but getting your numbers down with diet, with exercise, and maybe with medications, maybe with supplements, if you address them and get them to goal, 80% of the time it is preventable.
Wow.
And that's for all of us. So we've got to play a role in that. And we have to be proactive in it, but it's a daily choice. It's not
Mhm.
like okay, I'm going to eat healthy on Monday, but then Tuesday I'm going to binge. It's making the choice every single day to show up for yourself, to make the healthiest choices that you can. And you get to go through menopause in a very different way. I have something that I have to share with you because I'm not sure if this came up in the past either. Hot flashes are associated with heart disease. The more hot,
No.
yes, yes. The more,
What?
yes. The more hot flashes, the more frequent, the worse they are, the greater chance you have of having heart disease. They're associated. So, one of the most powerful tools to prevent hot flashes is exercise. It has been shown to be the most powerful tool to prevent hot flashes. Why? It's the same mechanism
Mm,
about keeping the arteries healthy, keeping the endothelium and the microvasculature distensible and pliable and really I think of the heart as like the metronome of our lives. This
mhm,
organ, it is living with us in our days. We all know what heartsick and heartache is, and we feel everything in our hearts. How could hot flashes not be connected to our hearts? It kind of makes sense. So the healthier the lining of the arteries are, the greater chance you can combat even hot flashes. And so how we move, how we eat is going to address the issues of menopause just as much as it's going to address the issues of heart disease. It's going to help us sleep. It's going to help us feel happier. It's going to keep our bones healthy. It's preventing heart disease. I always say exercise is the best medication. And so if you're going to choose to do something every day, figure out 30 minutes moderate intensity exercise. And I promise you, it's going to change your life.
You have given so much comfort personally as I'm sitting here listening to you because before the podcast, as I was researching, I had a level of anxiety for myself and my great network of women in my age that are at risk. And how you describe also the data and just the scientific evidence around protecting your heart health on exercise and this lifestyle of making healthy food choices on the impact to your heart health and your overall life is really comforting. I can't tell you how valuable these insights will be for the thousands of women, God willing, that hear this today and going forward. It's really powerful.
I'm so glad to hear that. I think one of the most frustrating things that I hear from women is they'll say, this is how it goes. My mother had heart disease, my father had heart disease. It's probably going to happen to me, or they didn't have it and it's not going to happen to me. Every single person who has a heart is at risk for heart disease. Let's start there. That
Hmm.
means we all got a chance of this. But let's figure out how to prevent it. And I think the one thing I can tell you is the generation before, maybe the meat and potatoes generation that didn't exercise, has a very different look to it than our generation. I
Hmm.
mean, I
Yeah.
think 80 is the new 40. What are you going to do? You know, how do you want to be when you're 80? I decided I'm going to be snow skiing. It's my favorite thing. There's no reason not to be.
That's
But to
right.
get there, you've got to just make an effort and you have to understand that means, that phrase, if you don't use it, you lose it. Well, that's referring to exercise. You got
Right.
to
Right.
move. You got to keep moving because the second you stop is when all of this stuff really starts happening. Aging is something that happens to all of us. Um, I love the concept of longevity when we use this word longevity and wellness. It sounds fabulous. The flip side of this is we all are going to age. And the question for me is how are we going to do it? How are we going to get there?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And for some of us, how we look on the outside is how we're going to choose to get there. I'm going to tell you how we are on the inside is actually really how we look on the outside. And if we feed ourselves correctly, if we exercise the right way, if we get enough sleep, if we manage our stress, drink enough water, I'm not going to tell you you're not going to have wrinkles, but I am going to tell you your skin is going to be more glowy. The texture is going to be different. You know, the way that we approach our self-care is not only going to define us for the next hopefully 40, 50 years, but it's how we're going to live out our lives. And the fact is we have more in control of this choice and this decision than we ever realized. I'm not going to tell you menopause is not challenging and weird and you don't feel different and you look in the mirror and you're like, who is that? When did I turn into my mother? I mean, yes, we all have the same. And it could be daunting and depressing and frustrating. Um, I launched a technology company 2 years ago. I'm in the room with 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds, but I have the benefit of experience and knowledge and understanding, and I know who I am. And we don't get that until we get to this stage in life. And I'm going to tell you, it's a great time in life. Don't get depressed. Live through it. Power through. You know, we've got this. You just got to look at it a little differently. You know what I mean?
Yep, so well said. And how I synthesize what you're saying, it is so important now more than ever in our life to be selfish. We talk about it as being the third chapter, with the first chapter being zero to university and slugging through school and all the social pressures. Then the second chapter of getting ahead in our lives and having children and growing our family. Then our kids go off and fly the nest, and we're left as 50 something women with the benefit of wisdom, hopefully some financial success. So we have the benefit of a bit of time and insight and wisdom to make the investment in getting the right doctor. And if our general practitioner isn't giving us the testing that we need, get someone else and invest in your health through your self-care habits of exercise and our lifestyle of food choices. So now I want to hear your story, as well as tell us about this incredible tech company that you founded to help women.
When I started, there was no such thing as women in heart disease. It was about 20 years ago. And I was in my training, and we were taught women did not get heart disease. I was in the emergency room. A 53-year-old woman was wheeled in. I was a student, and she was sweating, nauseous, vomiting, holding her chest and stomach, and she was put in the corner of the emergency room with the diagnosis of gastroenteritis. She proceeded to have a heart attack in front of our eyes.
No.
It was terrible. And I looked around and I was like, oh my goodness, is everyone as devastated as I am? And I had that Oprah moment, that aha moment, you know, that she talks about. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do in my life. I am not going to stand by and watch this happen anymore. And I went to the chief of cardiology. I asked for a women in heart disease fellowship, and there was no such thing. It was so early. And so I said, okay. I want to do a preventive cardiology fellowship. And he said, there's no such thing. And I'm like, this is not okay. Like, what am I going to do in my life? This is what I need to do. And he created a preventive cardiology fellowship for me. I was one of the first preventive cardiology fellows in this country and did research on lifestyle intervention for people who already had heart disease, and ended up becoming the director of a cardiac rehab program after doing a cardiology fellowship. Was part of Go Ahead for Women through the American Heart Association when it first started 20 years ago. And that's how I wrote the book and toured this country to make this happen, for women to understand and get the message. But here's the 911, and you just touched on it. If women are told they're fine, because women are gaslighted 59% of the time when it comes to their heart. because many doctors look at them on the outside. And I'm sorry, we all can pull ourselves together. So what we look like on the outside might not be what's going on the inside, right?
Yeah.
And so the 911 is empower yourself, educate yourself, know your risk factors, know how you feel. No one was, maybe your doctor wasn't there with you during your pregnancy. You've got to be your own journalist. Tell your story. If you're having symptoms and you're getting ignored, neglected, sent home from the emergency room, stand up for yourself and become educated. I launched Adesso. Adesso is the language of love and romance Italian. It means now. If the time is not now for us, for women in heart disease, I don't know when it is. I say personally, my goodness, my now. If this does not happen for us, I'm never giving up. So let's do this together now. I believe this is a mission. This is a movement. Everyone listening, tell 4 friends. Let's spread the word. But Adesso for me is about education and empowerment and self advocacy for women. And it's also to empower primary care providers to create preventive strategies for women based on very preventive, precise, precision medicine, blood testing, and stress testing that can create diet and exercise prescriptions for women based on their own personal data. We are launching across the country. Look for us, but you can find us on Adesso, ADESSO .health, where you can start the journey with a little quiz. We talk about your strengths and weaknesses and how you take care of yourself. Are you nourishing yourself? Are you moving? Are you relating to your life in a way that empowers you? Your relationships. We all know the relationships that suck us dry, the bad ones for us, they are actually bad for our hearts. Are we surrounded with support? There is a 38% increase in heart disease risk for women who are in jobs that they are not happy in. So, as I mentioned before, the heart, it's the center of our lives. It carries our joy, but it carries our pain, and that pain increases our risk of heart disease. So we ask you these questions. We ask you about sleep and about stress. We ask you if you're taking care of yourself to make sure these things are a part of your life. So that quiz, that's the beginning of your journey. And then really understanding how to find your own health within your lifestyle in a way that makes sense to you is part of MyAdesso and part of understanding how best to take care of yourself. I always say I have lots of toys on me, my Aura and my Apple Watch, and these toys sync to MyAdesso, so we can really keep track of our days and keep track of what we're doing for ourselves in all aspects of our lives. Not everyone loves that, but when data becomes actionable and makes sense to who you are, it's so powerful.
I believe that you have just given us and our listeners a life-saving 30 minutes. And the fact that there is very actionable steps that women can take away, or loved ones of women in menopause can take away and take action, absolutely myadesso.health. We will post that everywhere on our socials, our website, so that women can get into your ecosystem and invest in their health. It's their heart health. Our hearts need to be our North Star. It's more than just the center of our universe. This will drive the third chapter to be either healthy and positive and rewarding, or in hospitals and sick. And how would we want to spend our third chapter? I believe you've just saved lives, Dr. Steinbaum, and we are so grateful that you gave us the time today to do that.
Thank you. I want to leave you with my last statement, which is we ask the question, what's your now? What's your Adesso? And as you just said, what is your reason for being as healthy as you can be, for taking charge of your hearts, for being in the driver's seat for the rest of your life? 80% of the time, heart disease is preventable, and it is our number one health threat. Take charge, and you can do it. You can really, really do it. Also, join us on MyAdesso on Instagram and tell us your now. The
Love that.
community you've created, and this is my parting words: community, friendships, mission, movement, passion. That's where change happens. It doesn't happen when we're alone in our own minds.
Mhm.
It happens when we all come together to support each other, to know that we can really have an impact on ourselves, our friends, our families, our loved ones. And we can do it. We can do it. So thanks so much for having me. That
Oh,
was great.
you're incredible. Thanks, Dr. Steinbaum.